Hey, I'm Arisian, and over the past 6 to 12 months, I've been learning a lot about the US economics and finance system. I feel like every day we've been getting more and more news, and I've just been consuming as much of it as I can find. And then a few months ago, I kind of started asking the question of why. I mean, I don't plan on living there, it doesn't really affect me. And so I wanted to learn about Australia. I mean, that's the country I live. I'd like to start knowing some of our news and what's going on here. And to underpin all of that, I want to know how the government works. I mean, financially, in the economics portion of the Australian dollar, how does it work? What government systems do we have that underpins that? What groups are involved with it? So first and foremost, I started digging. Like, who is involved? And I dug and kept digging. And look, there's a lot of different groups. I mean, there's some hilarious stuff in there. Like the DTA, they're the ones responsible for making all of our government websites friendly and easy to use. And then you look at their website and you're like, yeah, vomit green and dark gray. No wonder we have terrible government websites. I found the terrorism pool. I don't know, it feels like where I belong after reading all of this garbage, but I mean, it was interesting. But like, to pull it back, with all these groups, I was like, what is the fundamental question that I'm trying to answer? And it's, what is the purpose of all these agencies? And the purpose is to have a stable economy, which is basically to say that if you put your money in a bank, if you open a business, you expect that you should be able to take the money out of the bank and that your business should be based off your own success. Like, you're not going to open up a lemonade stand and the government's going to like ban lemonade stands and you have to forcibly close it, right? It should be that the system is stable enough that you can at least predict from the government side what's going to happen. And so with that, I think I pulled out what are the key and high-level government organizations that are tied to this. And I kind of set them in three buckets. We've got the banks, the bank, the regulators, and the spenders. And they kind of sit into these three buckets. Now, I'm a league degen through and through, so I'm going to be talking about all of this through the lens of Arcane. I haven't seen season 2. I'm sure everyone changes drastically, so take it with a grain of salt, but that's the lens I'm going to be talking through all of these organizations about. So firstly, I want to talk about the banks, what makes up what I'm going to call the bank. And we're going to start off with the ATO, which is the Australian Tax Office. The ATO is like Vi. If you do what she says, there's no problems. If you go against what she says, she'll cause problems. So the ATO collects tax, okay? So they collect tax from individuals, businesses, and corporations. They don't set the tax rates. They don't set the laws on that. They simply collect the tax. And if you don't pay, they come after you. Like Vi. Next, we have the AOFM, which is the Australian Office of Financial Management. They are very much like Savica, okay? Savica in the show just listened to Silco's plans, and if Silco told her to do something, she'd go and do it. The only time she'd act on her own is if she knew that Silco was going to ask anyway, right? The AOFM get debt for the government. So a certain, let's say an agency comes up and says we need $1 million, they will go and dish out treasury bonds, which is basically a government loan, to allow that agency to have that $1 million. People tell them what to do, they get a loan that will allow them to do that thing. Lastly, we have the RBA. The RBA is like Heimerdinger. Okay, so the RBA is the Reserve Bank of Australia. Now, I didn't realize this till recently. They are a bank. I mean, it makes sense. Whenever a government agency pays a bill, it comes out of their wallet effectively. Okay, they're the ones that hold the money. They only have one lever they can move, which is they control interest rates. So they're the ones, when you get a home loan, when you get a credit card loan, like a credit card or any kind of interest rate, they are at the baseline of what that rate is. And this is the only function they have. This is the only thing they're forcibly able to do. They can do some they do some financial recommendations. They manage some payment system stuff. So like when you pay with your credit card, making sure that's available, but it's not really that important in the scheme of things. The important part is they're separate from the government. So the government isn't able to control them. They can give loose recommendations to them, but they are able to do whatever they like. They have a goal, which is to make sure that, like they call it monetary policy is stable. They're basically trying to make it so interest rates and inflation are at a balance at the lowest rates they can. About 2% they aim for inflation, 2 to 3. So they are separate from the government. Okay, they're paid for by the government. They're part of the government, but the government cannot control them. And the government hates this. Like Heimerdinger in Arcane, everyone's like, yeah, he's smart, but he's kind of old and he doesn't want to do all the things that we want to do. Like, we know he's smart and cool and yeah, he's the founder and all this, but ideally, we just don't have to listen to him and it'll be fine, right? Like, they're stopping us. He's stopping us doing all the hex gates, right? So then it begins. Jay stands up. They're called out for simply rubber stamping decisions. First vote. They're being told that they're making interest rate decisions using their gut instead of their brain. That they're amateurs rather than experts. Another vote. The government decides to put together a shadow board of economists to test, to basically check what the government, the RBA are doing. And out of 130 instances, this shadow board makes the 105 decisions the same. So out of 130 decisions, 105 of them are the same as the RBA. And there's a difference of less than 0.5%. So by all metrics, the RBA are doing a great job. Whenever there's a difference, again, only 25 instances of difference, the difference is less than 0.5%. But the council is unanimous. The RBA goes from being one board to being split into 3. There is the Monetary Policy Board. This is the board that manages interest rates. Remember, the only thing that the RBA really can control. There's a government's board for like internal stuff, managing banking services, internal hiring, stuff like that. Payment system to make sure that payment systems are fine, but none of that really matters. This is the only one we care about. Well, who's going to be on this board? Well, they say it's going to be the governor and deputy governor of the Reserve Bank, the Treasury Secretary, and 6 external members. These will not be RBA staff. There are concerns that it'll be dominated by academics. Well, this happened in March, so we know. These 6 non-executive members are appointed by the treasurer. The council won. So this means as much as the RBA is a separate thing, the treasurer, who again is effectively voted in, he gets to choose who sits on it, which by extension just means it's no longer separate. But anyway, this is, look, I'm concerned it's going to be full of Nepo babies, but this doesn't matter. Effectively, it's like this. The ATO and AOFM give their money to the RBA, who holds it and then distributes it out to the rest of whatever organizations need it. Okay, this is effectively how it works. And we hope that this is how it continues to work. So next, we have the regulators. First, we have ASIC, which is the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. They are very much like Caitlin, okay? They work within the realm of the rules and punish those who break them, okay? So they specifically manage things like the financial sector. So that includes any business that acts on the ASX, so it has stocks. They manage things to do with banks. They manage things to do with investment companies. Anything that's basically, if you think about it, anything that involves large amounts of money, they're the ones regulating it. Okay, and they regulate everything that's happening now. So if you act outside of the rules, they're the ones who are going to dig up what you've done and punish you. Next, you've got APRA. APRA is like ECHO, where APRA, is the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority. They're very prim and proper like that. They're very much like ECHO, okay? ECHO goes into the future and then sees what happens and then winds it back and then can make decisions to try and avoid that outcome. They're like him, but like really small and pathetic. So their job is to look in the future and see like, this thing isn't going to work in 20 years. If we keep this up, it's going to be bad. And so theoretically, they're meant to like regulate and, punish people. They kind of don't. They're more friendly about it and are a bit more on the side of like, please, could you just work with us and be nice? But theoretically, their job is to regulate things to benefit things in the long term. Next, you have IPEA, the Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority. They are like the book that Victor holds. It's literally just a list of how much parliamentarians spend on travel and budget expenses, like basic internal budgeting. It's just a list, okay? The last one that I'm going to put on the regulators is kind of a bit outside of it, is the Treasury. The Treasury is like Marcus. Now, Marcus in the show very much sat between Piltover and Zon. Okay, so he was a government official in Piltover, but Silco, who was the de facto head of Zon at that point, kind of had him under the table. So he had to make decisions that would appease all of the people he worked for, but wouldn't make Silco angry. So he has to seem like he's doing something without doing anything. Really sits in where the Treasury is. And I found a really great example of this. So buy now, pay later. Big issue in Australia. We haven't had any regulation on it at all. So in 2022, November 2022, they started to do an investigation into it. And so they started this process November 2022. And they put out a call for people to respond, and believe it or not, the only people who responded was all of these companies. And look what they said. They said, so Afterpay, one of the biggest buy now, pay later companies, responded, and they said, look, we're helping the most vulnerable credit card users. If they use a credit card, they'll pay up to 7 times more in fees compared to Afterpay users, which is incredible. Then you look at the graph and it's late fees only compared to actual interest paid, and that's why there's such a difference. If you know anything about buy now, pay later, the whole problem is it's not one fee. The whole thing is the second you go over time, they're like, yeah, here's 60 different random fees all at once. So basically, the Treasury has gone out and be like, what does everyone think? And these are all of the buy now, pay later companies have come back and said, look, we're not the problem. We're the hero. If you punish us, you're basically punishing the everyday person, and you don't want to do that, do you? And it really reminded me of this scene where the Treasury is like sitting on the stool. They're like, look, we really need to do something about buy now, pay later. They're sitting there on their chair and being like, look, if you do anything, that sounds like it's going to be more of a problem than good. And so we get to let's have a look at like what they actually did. They said the LCCs, basically this is buy now, pay later, should be regulated under the Credit Act. So they should be treated, and the credit code should be extended to cover them. So what this means is they should be treated like every other holder of debt. So any other holder of debt has to be covered by the credit code. That these companies have to maintain an Australian credit license, and we'll stop them restructuring themselves to avoid regulation, and they must make inquiries about the financial situation. So their response was to treat it like every other piece of debt. Literally what this is what every other debt provider has to have at minimum. So it took them 2.5 years. And the thing they come back with is like, oh, we'll just make it so they have to be treated like every other piece of debt, which is a decision that anyone could have made in 30 seconds. But anyway, these make up the regulators. So ASIC are basically regulating systems today. APRA are regulating systems in the future. IPEA are just a report of all government spending. And the Treasury, their job is to make recommendations to the government about government financial systems. They are the main body that make financial recommendations. But they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Lastly, we have the spenders. There are there's one main spender I want to talk about, which is the Department of Finance. They are like Milo. I don't know if you remember Milo from the show, but he was a kind of insignificant character in season 1. Basically, he did some stuff that was important, but by no means was he the be-all, end-all, right? But he wants to make himself seem like every plan is integral to him, and without him, everything would fail. This is exactly like the Department of Finance, okay? And basically, what they do is manage the government spending. When you say you need to pay a bill, they're the ones that will arrange to pay it. If you're a federal employee, they're the ones that pay you. They're the ones that pay your super. They do all the payments on that side. So I decided to have a look, and all these organizations, I had a look. There's this report that they have to do, I think it's every year, about what their plans are for the next 12 months. And most of these organizations had a clear 2 sentences and then would go on to a full-bodied report that was usually surprisingly succinct, even though it was in depth. These guys had a 15,000 word report that just yapped about nothing. I've highlighted some things here. These are some of their goals for this year. 100% of entities have access to cash within agreed timeframes. So if they promise to pay you money, they'll pay you on time. They'll pay pensions on time. They'll pay employees on time. They'll make sure that the invoices are processed correctly. Their massive achievement for this year is to achieve the minimum requirements of their job. And then they're constantly hey guys, no need to thank me. Hey, you know what? It's just another day of being a hero. They're so self-obsessed, but they don't really do that much. So that's the Department of Finance. And in the spender section, you have all other government spending. All right. So any other government organization, if they spend money, they're here. The last thing I'm just going to touch on is financial markets. So the financial markets, again, this is the ASX, or the Australian stock market. This is this is banks, this is financial businesses. This is where everything else exists. All standard business exists in here, right? So when you put it all together, this is what it looks like. We have the ATO collecting tax and the AOFM getting government loans and giving that to the RBA. The RBA then funds everything in this group, and because they manage interest rates affect the financial markets. You have IPEA that are effectively a report on the government and their specific spending, specifically in the realm of travel. You have the Treasury that provide recommendations to the government, usually about financial markets. They also do some other stuff in this realm, but they provide recommendations of what the government should do about this financial markets. You have ASIC and APRA who are regulating the financial markets for today and tomorrow. To pull this back to our original question of what is we found the purpose, which is to give us a stable economy. Does it achieve that? Well, it works. Kinda. Much like the situation with Heimerdinger, the biggest problem is that the government looks like this. None of these people want this to happen to them. All of them are happy for regulation, as long as it's not to their businesses. All of them are happy for, us to do hard decisions, as long as it's not while they're in power. So all of these groups do a reasonable job. The truth is they're constantly growing and changing. And as part of that, they're trying to evolve and keep up. But as part of that evolution, they're also kind of degrading. There's a bit of regular erosion that happens, and, we never know where it's going to end up. But the point is, right now, at least, it works. And if it ever stops working, where will we go? Well, we're going to go straight to the terrorism pool.